Okay, so taking a look at number 7, if you notice these both have the trig function sine, but we do have this 2x here. So we are going to have to worry about the domain. Instead of it just being the regular 0 to 2 pi, it's going to be 0 to 2 pi times 2, which is 4 pi. So when we're figuring out our answer, this means we're going to have 2 rounds of answers. And because we're going to have 2 rounds of answers, to get the second round, we're going to have to add 2 pi, because that's the whole circle, over 2. So when we get to the part where we need our next rounds, that information will come in handy. So these are already in descending order, and they're all in terms of sine, so you don't have to do any changing of trig functions. So you can do factoring. We can do easy factoring here, so there's not a number out front. So we're trying to find numbers that multiply to give you 2 and add to give you negative 3. So negative 2, negative 1. Only thing is, when you make your, it's not just going to be a regular sine, like if you're doing easy factoring, it's not just going to be sine x minus 2 and sine x minus 1. You got to make sure you include that 2x. So sine 2x minus 2 and sine 2x minus 1. Those are your two factors. Now you can always do this the long way, where you write the first term and then do your grouping. Or you can do it the shortcut because there was no number out front. So that's equal to 0, so if we split it down the middle, if we do sine, because this 2x right here is really inside of sine, so you can't do anything with that 2. So it's just sine 2x equals 2. So we are ready to look at our unit circle. We're trying to find anywhere on the unit circle where sine, or the y value, is equal to 2. Remember, it can't go over 1, so that can't happen. So then over here it says sine of 2x, if we add the 1 over, equals 1. So we're trying to find where on the unit circle is the y value equal to 1. Well, that happens at pi over 2. So we're going to say 2x equals pi over 2. So if we divide by 2x, we're going to have x equals pi over 4. Okay, so that was just the first round. We have to get a second round because it was 2x. So we're going to add 2 pi over 2, which is because we have a denominator of 4. We can make that 4 pi over 4. So we have pi over 4 plus 4 pi over 4. So our second round answer is going to be 5 pi over 4. So once again, we had to adjust our domain and do 2 rounds of answers because this was 2x here and not just a regular x. Alright, so taking a look at number 8. So when you glance at number 8, hopefully you notice we have the same trig functions, which is good, but we have this 3x. Okay, so that means we're going to have to adjust our domain. So instead of our domain being from 0 to 2 pi, it's going to be from 0 to 6 pi, which means we're going to have 3 rounds of answers. And when we go to get our 3 rounds, we're going to have to add 2 pi over 3. Okay, so in order to do this, they all have the same trig function, so we can just move everything to the left-hand side. Set it equal to 0. There's only 2 terms here, so you're just going to find a GCF for factoring. The GCF is tangent 3x. If we take out tangent 3x, that'll leave us with tangent 3x minus the square root of 3. So if I split this up, we're going to have tangent, remember that 3x is stuck inside, so you can't do anything with it, is equal to 0. So you're trying to find when is tangent equal to 0, so when is y divided by x equal to 0. So that happens over here, we have 0 divided by 1 and 0 divided by negative 1. So at 0 and pi, but you got to say 3x equals 0 and 3x equals pi. So the 2 answers you get from that side are 0 and pi over 3. Now, we do have to do 3 rounds of answers, but I'm going to get the other side before I do my rounds. So on the other side, if I add over my square root of 3, so once again, that that 3x is stuck, so you can't do anything there. Tangent is y over x. If I want the answer to be square root of 3, that means the square root of 3 over 2 had to be on top and 1/2 on the bottom. So we're trying to find when x is 1/2 and y is the square root of 3 over 2. They either both have to be positive or negative, so that's going to happen at pi over 3. And then that's going to happen at 4 pi over 3. So I'm going to get pi over 9, and I'm going to get 4 pi over 9. So those 4 answers are my first round of answers, okay? I have to have 3 rounds of answers because it's 3x. So to get the second round, we're going to be adding 2 pi over 3, or since some of these have a denominator of 9, 6 pi over 9. Okay, so 0 plus 2 pi over 3 is going to give us just 2 pi over 3. And then if we do pi over 3 plus 2 pi over 3, that would be 3 pi over 3, which would just be pi. Pi over 9 plus 6 pi over 9 will give us 7 pi over 9. And then 4 pi over 9 plus 6 pi over 9 will give us 10 pi over 9. Okay, so we have 8 answers so far, but that was only the first 2 rounds. So to get the third round, you're still adding the same thing. So you're adding 2 pi over 3, which is 6 pi over 9 if we need that. So 2 pi over 3 plus 2 pi over 3 gives us 4 pi over 3. Cut off a little bit. And then if we're adding pi plus 2 pi over 3, we could change this pi to 3 pi over 3. So this would be 5 pi over 3. And then our 7 pi over 9, we can add our 6 pi over 9. So 13 pi over 9. And then finally, 10 pi over 9 plus 6 pi over 9. And we'll get 16 pi over 9. So, those are our 12 answers that we have there. Those are our 3 rounds of answers. We had to do the 3 rounds because it was 3x and not just a regular x. So moving on to number 9. Okay, so number 9, if you notice, we have 2 different trig functions. Well, we do have that 2x. So before we figure out anything with that 2x, let's get all the same trig function. So if you remember, we have tangent and we have secant, but which one is squared is the one you want to change. So we're going to change this. Okay, if you remember, tangent squared x plus 1 is equal to secant squared x. Okay, that same thing works if it's 2x or if it's 3x or whatever. So tangent squared 2x is secant squared 2x minus 1. Okay, those 2's can get thrown in there. So I'm going to replace tangent squared with secant squared 2x minus 1. And then I'm going to distribute. I'm going to go ahead and bring that 4 over. And then we're going to put everything in order. And we're going to combine like terms. So it looks like that. So we do have all the same trig functions, so we are ready to factor. But before I do that, just so we don't forget, we do have these 2x's. So we are going to have to adjust our domain and make it from 0 to 4 pi, which means we're going to have 2 rounds of answers. And we're going to be adding 2 pi over 2 because it was 2x. So I have to keep that in mind. So here you're going to have to do the long factoring because of this 3. So 3 times 1 gives us 3. The numbers that multiply to 3 and add to the 4, 3 and 1. Bring down our first term. Replace the middles with 3 secant 2x plus 1 secant 2x. And bring down your last term. Grouping, GCF is going to be 3 secant 2x, which will leave us with secant 2x plus 1. GCF here is just going to be 1. Insides are the same, so one factor is secant 2x plus 1. Other factor is 3 secant 2x plus 1. Set it equal to 0, and we're ready to split it down the middle. So over here, if we add over or subtract over our negative 1, this 2x is stuck in the middle, so you can't do anything with it. So we're trying to find when secant x is equal to negative 1. Now, remember, we can work with cosine, the reciprocal, to make it a little bit easier. So reciprocal of negative 1 is just negative 1. So the cosine value, or the x value where it's at negative 1, that is pi. So it's really 2x equals pi. So pi over 2 is the answer for the first round on this left-hand side. On the right-hand side, if we subtract over our 1, 2x is stuck, so we're looking where it's negative 1/3. I don't really want to work with secant, so I'm going to change it to cosine, the reciprocal. So that's going to be equal to negative 3. Well, remember, negative 3, the lowest it can go is negative 1. So this is not going to give me an answer. So we do have to remember we were working with 2x here. So this is our first round answer. We need the second round answer. Because it was 2x, we're adding 2 pi over 2. So we're going to have pi over 2 plus 2 pi over 2. So our other answer that we're going to get is going to be 3 pi over 2. So those were our 2 round answers, and that gave us the answer for that.